Hi and welcome. So it's 3 p.m. Anders has the church bells of Munich donged away from you there. That's like the tradition how we start these sessions every time.
Yeah, it's absolutely correct. I'm hearing them right now.
Awesome. So we're going for Munich church bell tower time for some reason. So my name is Thomas, and I'm just going to go through slightly how this live session works to begin with. So first of all, we want you to, if possible, to have the camera on so we can get some kind of interaction with each other, and it's just nice. And try to look as interested as possible. It's not really the same as doing this for a live audience, but still you want to get some kind of human interaction to feel that people think you're interesting while speaking. That said, we also want you to mute your microphone during the session. Otherwise, when we're so many in here, it's going to be really chaotic. So thank you very much for that. During the sessions, there might be questions coming up. It's like, oh, what was that example? I didn't get that phrase properly. Please, just very, very simple, write it down in the chat. And I hope you can find that here in Zoom pretty easily. Yeah, you see Anders and Nella is now pointing here. So probably something pings up there somewhere. Please post the questions there. And then after we're done with the lecturing part of the session, then we're going to try to filtering down the different questions and bring them up and hear your voices. So this is like the agenda for today. So first, it's like this session, who are we, and some guidelines here. And then Anders will talk about the intro about digital marketing, which links into this week's learning kit, obviously. And then, as I said, then we're going to have some questions and maybe a little bit of discussion. And then we're checking out, and we're going to do that as timely as possible. We get the same messenger there in the background of Anders' place in Munich. So when the church bell rings, then we're out. So that's how it works. Cool. So these are the different learning groups. So the names here is not the most important thing. It's just that you're divided in different learning groups. It would be just too much of all of you to get to know all of you. Oh wow, what's going on here? So that's how it goes, and I'm in charge of facilitating for the bees and the bee and cats, and the Nella is in charge of dog and fish group. So here we have just some from the places where you're from the companies, and here this is the word cloud of all the different titles that you have reported in here from the start in the beginning. So and we do have a little bit here, so I think you can probably watch this later on if you want to look into companies and the titles here. Those are different things that you said what you want to learn from here, and I don't think these ones are any news to you or so to say. Yep, we can move on. Oh, and I already said, I'm Thomas, you know about me, and let's listen into the other peeps here.
Yeah, Anders, as you've hopefully seen in the introduction video or in the welcome kit, pre-course tips. And then we have Nella.
Yes. Hello.
And which learning groups is it that you're in charge of?
Sorry?
Would you remind me which learning groups that you're in charge of?
Dog and fish. I just saw that we dropped somebody. Some people had, I think they misunderstood where the live session was, so I'm sorry. Yes, dog and fish.
Right, yeah. So I did hear quite a few messages coming in on Slack on one of your computers right now. So it would be great if one of you would look into seeing if there's anyone having trouble joining the session. And while you're doing that, I could already start getting into the content of today's session. How does that sound?
Perfect.
Okay. So first, a little bit more info, a little bit of a fresh reminder of what we've already told you in the welcome email and what you've probably been able to sort of get from the pre-course tips and first learning kit. This course is built around weekly learning kits that we publish usually on Sunday or at the very latest on Mondays, where we present you with some content built around a weekly topic and some challenges. And then the live sessions, like the one you are attending today, we try to go a little bit deeper. So we sort of invite in a speaker. In this case, in this week, it's me. And I will give you my perspective on digital marketing. And next week, we will have someone else coming in sharing their expert perspective on attraction and so on. And we will also use the live session to answer questions on the weekly topic. So if you have a question that's coming up and you don't really feel like you're getting the replies that you are looking for from reaching out in your learning group or in DM discussions or in one of the other Slack channels, post them in live session questions, because that's where our speakers will always have a look before the session and after. So if there's anything that's sort of not being taken care of in the session, we will actually have time to go on to Slack and continue the discussion there. So it makes it easier for them to know that they always have one place to look in. So post the questions to them there. And then we ask you to do one challenge or one set of challenges each week. This week, it's the same for both the people that want to work with tactical and strategical, but most of the time, it's actually going to be 2 different sets of challenges. And then you will sort of document that process that you go through as you're dealing with the things we ask you to do. You post that in your learning group through Doris, our co-facilitator and bot in this course. And she sends out an instruction tomorrow on how you actually do that, because tomorrow should be the earliest that we expect anyone to actually be able to finish the course, given that we're doing this session today. And then you actually have one more job, which is to comment and give feedback on each other's journals, which is like actually the main thing. It's great that you partake in the challenges and that you dig into the learning kit that we give you. But where you will be learning the most and really maximize the learnings from this course is by going into completely other business cases and understanding what they did when we're talking about this particular topic. So I urge you to really explore those and give each other feedback. And as I said in the pre-course tips video, the best way to get feedback is to role model giving feedback. And then I think we should go a little bit deeper. I saw that this question popped up this week as well, around the 2 tracks of the course. So yeah, we have the tactical and the strategical side on this course, and it's mostly applicable or almost exclusively applicable to the challenges. And what we ask you to do there is basically consider what it is that you want to get out of this course and what the needs of your business is, and then decide. And it's gonna, since we will present different challenges each week, you can actually read through both and then decide which one you want to do. You don't have to stick with tactical just because you started out with it. Maybe one week it doesn't make sense for you at all, and then you should, put your efforts into the strategical side. We're quite flexible with seeing how you interpret the challenges we give you, and they're often also worded kind of broadly. Even though there are specifics in them that we want to see you accomplish. So tactical is more hands-on, I would say, whereas strategic is perhaps a little bit more cerebral. Tactical often asks you to do a specific something and report back on it. So you do something in the beginning of the week, and then at the end of the week, you put in your reflection journal, how did it go? Strategic, on the other hand, that's where you decide what should be done, why is it important, set some objectives and targets that you need to reach. Both of them actually requires goals, which is why both of you are asked to do a SMART goal this week. And I will talk more on setting goals a little bit later. And what I want to just point out is that it's perfectly fine if you, mix and match. You could do both one week, you could do a tactical one week, and then the strategic the next. We're very flexible on this. But try and, stick with one set of challenges at least, so that you do, if you decide to do tactical, do that week's tactical, and don't do the first point in tactical and the second point in strategic. All right. And then a little bit more course info around Hyper Island. So Hyper Island is a marketing and business school, as you might have learned. And what the perspective that we have on the world is that the world used to be more linear, or at least used to appear more linear, simple, and straightforward, whereas the world we live in today often feels complex, chaotic, and constantly changing. And what can we do then about that? Well, Hyper Island likes to use a methodology called experiential learning, or learning by doing. And that's basically the process where you acquire knowledge by learning new skills and reflecting upon them. How did I behave? What was my attitude through that experience? And it is a widely used learning approach. It has many different names, and it's the one that we will be using throughout this course. So this spiral is kind of an important basis of how Hyper Island work. It starts with giving you or asking you to have a tangible experience. It's the do part, and then you reflect upon that. You observe, react, you respond and reflect upon the experience. Then you start to generalize concepts from that. You sort of draw some conclusions from the experience, and then you apply it again. So you actually are able to start over the process again. So you experiment with new behaviors and approaches for how to solve a problem. And thereby you can iteratively learn new things. But don't just take my word for it. This is actually similar to how one of the Hyper Island co-founders worded it when asked about it on Quora. How do you explain your education at Hyper Island to others? Learning by doing, projects set by real clients, and facilitated reflection on what's being learned. Without further ado, I thought we would actually now start digging into the topic of this week, which is digital marketing. So what do you need to know to get started with digital marketing? Well, I think we should talk about some of the drivers that have led us to where we are with digital marketing and some of the things that are important to understand with it. And the first one is, very simply, all marketing, digital or non-digital, is about getting people to do something. It's like we put it in the learning kit. You do something, you feel something, we want them to want something, usually so that they end up buying a specific something. And that part hasn't really changed. People are still being persuaded through the same cognitive mechanisms by their feelings as before. But before, marketing used to be more inaccessible. It used to be expensive. It was not very measurable, and it was quite monopolized. And most of those things have changed. So display advertising, similar to the billboards that we saw on the previous slide, that hasn't disappeared. It still exists, but it exists in so many more forms. It exists as a pop-up in the app that your children may use. It exists as banners on the website you visit, and it's that annoying ad that keeps following you around when you looked at a product on Amazon and then go somewhere else, and those sneakers just keep popping up everywhere you go. So today, what has changed is that we have much more content, we have much more marketing channels, we have a cheaper distribution, and what this really forces us as brands or as marketers to do is to focus. And what I like us to focus on is not convincing the skeptics, but rather tailoring to the people that like what you do and what you stand for. So what digital marketing is, you should be aiming for control and hyper-targeting, and you should design content so that it's different for different platforms and different segments of your audience. And it's important to understand that just because we're talking hyper-targeting, that doesn't mean that TV commercials is all of a sudden out of the picture. Traditional marketing is not dead by any means. Many different forms of it still exist, and what is important to understand is that something that you do for TV might not be instantaneously translatable into an ad for YouTube or Instagram, or the other way around for that matter. So I'm going to use an example from last year's Super Bowl, Doritos Blaze versus Mountain Dew commercial that they did. And first I want to run through what the goal of any video is. It's always the same. You want to make a viewer do three things. You want them to sit up to sort of get their attention. You want them to lean back first and enjoy the story that you're trying to tell them. And then you want them to lean forward and actually do something after they watch the video. So sit up means that you need to open the video strongly. You need to grab people's attention. Lean back is when they realize that they are sort of in the safe hands of storytellers. And then lean forward is asking people to engage with your video in some way. YouTube and Facebook videos, especially AdWords of them, they're all about the first 2 or 5 seconds. It's on a cost per view model, meaning that the business model is completely different than it used to be for TVCs, TV commercials. consumers today, you know, they have the ability to opt out and skip your ad altogether most of the time. So you really have to work to make it work. And you can forget kind of about how long is my video past the first few seconds, because those are the most important seconds, the first 5. And at the same time, you don't want, you know, your YouTube and Facebook videos to exist in a complete vacuum, and you don't want your TV commercials to exist separated from your digital strategy, because whatever you put on a TV, it needs to be picked up by using keywords that people will search for when looking for that content online. If you've invested heavily in making you know, not only in the production of an ad, but actually reaching someone through buying a TV advertising, you want to pick up on that as much as you can. So you want to use keywords that people are searching for, whether it's about the product or about the people who are in it. So that's actually what I'm going to show you now from this case from last year. So this is from Google Trends. If you've never used Google Trends before, it's a tool for you to look into Google's vast data on how people are searching. And you can put in pretty much any search term whatsoever. And you will see not the exact number of people that are searching for something, but an index on relative to other things, how many were searching for a particular topic. So here we can see that, and what you need to keep in mind when you're doing a TV commercial is that you pick up demand on Google when you are creating a TV commercial. So in this case, Doritos Blaze, Mountain Dew Ice, they were new products. Back in early January of 2018, they started publishing this video on YouTube, and you can see that first spikes come, and that's not just people visiting the video, that's people searching for the video to find it. And then when the TV commercial is aired around the Super Bowl, there's a big spike. That's when people really start searching for it, because they found, oh wow, what a cool ad, that I want to see and share with my friends. They're leaning forward and engaging with it. And what's important is that you understand that you can actually then boost that even more by letting some PR kick in. You can create what I like to call a story about the story. It's basically feeding media different words of did you know kind of information. So for example, that's how you get the second boost that you see here, that is slightly off from the first boost. These brands, you know, they might say something like brand X got Y views on YouTube after their viral Super Bowl commercial. Peter Dinklage, who is part of this commercial, he practiced for this many hours to nail the rap in the Doritos video. Or Morgan Freeman got paid this many millions for his appearance in the Mountain Dew commercial. And by feeding the media this kind of nuggets, you actually get the second boost. So that's how you do a viral campaign today. You can plan for it, and you can kind of create it if you understand how these mechanics work. And then again, it's important to remember that all of this cannot be planned perfectly. In Doritos and Mountain Dew's case, I'm not sure that it was such a smart move to use someone like Morgan Freeman, because that's a search interest that's really hard to pick up on, since he keeps having a rather high search intent and search interest all the time. And we can see that he clearly had a much bigger spike way before this, so it can be really competitive to try and rank for this keyword yourself. So what I just showed you is kind of an example of the second part of digital marketing that is important to understand. It's all about the data. And this is the most important change and premise to understand for grasping what digital marketing is. It's about the data, because whenever someone clicks, scrolls, views, or pauses something, that's an action that's stored in a database somewhere if it's happening digitally. We can, you know, to a certain extent, try and opt out of it, but usually it's safest to assume that someone is tracking what you're doing when you're doing it digitally. And as marketers, regardless how you feel about that as an individual, you know, it might sound creepy to you when I'm just laying it out this bluntly to you right now. But what's important for you as marketers is to think that you can actually use this data. You can tailor user segments from different behaviors or different interests and demographics, and then you can actually retarget the people that we've already reached similar to how that, sneakers keep following you around. That's retargeting, and we will talk more about that later in the course. And data provides you also with insights. How do you utilize this? Luckily, in this day and age, when so much information is being put out there and being collected, we don't need to depend on mere humans to use this. We can actually use tools and algorithms to break it apart and make it much more tangible for us. And as a proof of your insights and efforts, when you are working as a marketer, coming up with new creative concepts and content and putting it out there, you can put data where your mouth is and actually prove how did it go, what happened, what did people do. So this means all of this data that we're getting mainly from the platforms that we're using to put out the advertisement or for tracking what's happening on our website has meant that the world has become more transparent than it used to be under traditional marketing. But it's far from completely transparent. Google and Facebook, for example, they don't tell us exactly how they sort things. We don't know we don't always know what makes a site end up at the top result for on Google for every single person and every single type of search they put in there. But we sure know it's important that you are in the top 3, because as you can see in this heat map, you can see that's where most people are even looking. There's very few that even have their eyes and scrolling go down further than the top results. And similarly on Facebook, and we have another sort of eye tracking study here, you can see that the newsfeed and the top of the newsfeed, that's really where we need to be. And, as I said, Google might not tell us exactly how they rank things, but they do tell us which keywords that brought specific users to your landing pages. And that's something we can learn from. So in terms of how the world has changed, this is probably the part where I feel like the least have changed. Internet sounded like, the new forum for democracy to prosper. But what we've ended up with recently, or maybe not so recently, is with these new monopolies when it comes to advertising. These two companies, Google and Facebook, make up, I believe, more than 100% of digital ad spend growth, which means that they're actually eating into the budgets of traditional marketing and basically getting all the money that is being put into digital ad spend from the Fortune 500. So a lot of new tools have been made available, and you no longer need to go through a big media agencies or through a publisher to measure and reach an audience. In that sense, marketing has become more democratized. Anyone, more or less, can go to these platforms and put out a piece of advertising out there. But we're still very much under the control of what these monopolies allow us to do, and who to target and when to target, and we don't know exactly how they decide to price things. So they make the most money from it, but they also control the access to it. And that goes for both us as marketers and as members of a potential target audience. So as a marketer, I have chosen to play along with these players, but as an individual, I'm trying to stay aware that this dominance of these two players means that there's probably less competition happening in the field, which leads to slower innovation and is likely to fail them at some point. Maybe you've heard in the last year that Facebook is actually facing more and more scrutiny, and maybe we will see some regulation coming in place that will change this picture. But for now, these are the monopolies that we're dealing with, and the reason why we are mostly focusing on their tools and platforms in this course. So some contenders to keep an eye on, just so that you know that they aren't the only ones out there. Amazon advertising, super fast growing. Besides AWS, Amazon Web Services, it's among the most profitable parts of Amazon. I'm going to use the clicker here. And then we have Apple Search Ads, which is mostly applicable to iTunes and to advertising on the App Store. We have Pinterest, which is a fast-growing field. It's actually they are somewhat coming back as a platform as part of their advertising suite having grown quite considerably. We have Alibaba, which of course in huge swaths of the world is a very, very important platform and a big player when it comes to web hosting and for ads. Twitter ads, not entirely sure how they're doing in the last quarter. We'll see what happens with Twitter, but ads is definitely, they've shown that they are growing at least. And LinkedIn, I think have supplied a lot of B2B customers in my clientele with a lot of good sort of ways to advertise and create leads directly through LinkedIn recently. So those are some of the growers to keep an eye on. So, okay, what does all of this mean and boil down to? Well, in my opinion, in digital marketing, everything is connected. And pretty much everything requires you to have a kind of systems thinking in place. And this is more a mindset this is more a mindset than it is about learning a particular set of tools. So in this course, even though we talk a lot about Google and Facebook and use their platforms as examples for how you do this, I don't want you to think that this course is a course in using those platforms alone, because it is more about the mindset than it is about learning how to use Google Analytics or Facebook Insights. So going back to how do we keep up with the change? How do we keep up with these platforms that keep changing things that might allow us to do one thing one day and not the next day? And the algorithms that keep changing how they decide what's going to be on top of Google and what's going to be top of Facebook newsfeed. How do we keep up with it? Well, we try things out. We need to understand when we do something, a certain results come of it. And that's how we learn and we try something again. So you have a circle looking very much similar to the learning spiral that is the foundation for all of Hyper Island's learning, but here it's directly applicable only to digital marketing. It's an experimental learning mindset where you test something out, you review it, you reflect upon it, you draw new conclusions from it, and then you launch a new test. You put some new content out there. And on top of this mindset, I would say, mimic the behavior of users, mimic their preferences by testing things out, because that's what all of us are doing online right now anyways. Digital services and trends, they develop really quickly. So being growth-oriented, working iteratively, that's the key for digital marketing more than any one tool that we can provide you with in this course. So I'm going to use a couple of more things, a couple of more minutes to explain a couple of more concepts that we talk about in this course. One is the growth model, and then it's about the user journey. Because digital marketing is about the full journey. How do you as brands or marketers support every step of the way for the users as they are moving towards a conversion with you? And the next weeks we will cover all of it, but we need to start somewhere. So start by getting to know you and your product and take, a little bit of a helicopter perspective on things and map out your user journey, or look at brands if you don't have a website or a product of your own that you can cover in mapping out the user journey. Look for brands that have inspired you or brands that you aspire to be more like, and look at what kind of user experiences are they putting in place. That's what this first challenge is about. It's about you finding experience so that you can start defining what sort of experience is it that we want to provide our users, and how do we want them to interact with us, and when do we want them to do a particular thing in their user journey with you. So this is the model that we have put in place for that. And why this model? Well, it has to do with that there are different mindsets that people are put through on each level of their journey. So it's been, a simple way for us to construct and sort out the content that we want to provide you with. So this week, we're taking a look on all of it at once, which we will again do by the end of this course. But then we have the 4 weeks in between where we will step by step go through attraction, how you actually start collecting users, activation, how you nudge them towards actually doing something, conversion, which is usually a sale, but is, you know, any kind of desirable action that you're asking your users to do, and retention, how do you actually keep people coming back and being interested in you over time, since that's usually the audience where you have the highest amount of revenue in the end, according to the Pareto principle or the 80-20 model. And we're going to connect a little bit to the Pareto principle in just a couple of slides again. But first, as promised, so a little bit about SMART goals. So SMART goals, as you might know from the learning kit already, it's a way for you to be focused in this course. As I said at the top, as digital marketers, we need to be focused. So SMART goals is a way of transforming, you know, objectives, business objectives, into actual targets for you to achieve within a time-bound manner. So what does SMART mean? Well, it means that it's specific, measurable, assignable, relevant, and time-bound. And the reason for this is that those are all the parameters you need to actually be able to track your own success. And it also gives you a deadline for when you should have achieved something. And that means that you can track that along the time and see, am I making progress towards my goal or not? And I think it's easier to sort of show another example of what a SMART goal can look like. So I'll use something from how we might recruit more people to these courses, for example. So one way that we could do that would be that we host these kind of live events where people that have visited Hyper Island or are on one of Hyper Island's email list, they get invited to an event, an online event, where we go through the course contents, or we go through the whole course catalog of Hyper Island. And what my SMART goal for the next 3 meetups will be is that I want to double the amount of guests to that event. And I will measure that by seeing how many people have signed up or chosen tentative in Google Calendar when we've been sending out invites or using some kind of tool, or maybe we've created a Facebook event where we're collecting it. So we have a place to measure the number of attendings and the number of tentative people. And I'm the one that's responsible for making this happen, but I will be supported by Nella and Thomas in sort of achieving this. And it's important because we know that having more people attend our networking events, whether they're online or in person, that generates more leads. And the goal, instead of being, you know, a 3-month goal, I'll set a timeline based on how many iterations I want to go through. So I want to reach this within the 3 next meetups. So the second one, I might not be already at doubling the guests, but I might be, you know, 1/3 of the way, and that will tell me, I made some progress towards my goal. And that's exactly how you want a SMART goal to be able to interact with you. It should give you a final deadline, but it should not be so close or so far away that it actually doesn't tell you anything whether you're progressing to it or not. And I'm happy to take more questions on that as we get to the end of the session pretty soon. Then we have this other concept, which is similar to the Pareto principle that I also just mentioned, the 1% rule, or as we sometimes like to call it, the 1-9-90 model. And basically what this is it was a thing that they saw early on the internet, especially on platforms where a lot of people are able to directly contribute, like Wikipedia or on forums. And that is that generally, it's only 1% of users that will actively create new content for you. And this is something that I see with a lot of the brands that I work with, that you have about 1% of users that you could label as co-creators. Then you have another 9% that will participate also in the discussion by having a lot of opinions. They like to comment sometimes, they like to rate, they like to share, but they don't necessarily do it for the same reasons as the 1% people. The 1%, they just do it because they love you and because they love your products, and you know, they want to see you succeed. The 9% are not necessarily so friendly, but you can alter that by trying to give them, you know, a platform for commenting, rating, and sharing, and not trying to write them too much on the face on what they should do or how they should do it. So by enabling your 1% to sort of set the tone, you can have the 9% follow. And that's actually what we show in this video in the learning kit around leadership lessons from the dancing guy. I'm not going to show this whole video now because I want to leave a lot of time for us to take questions in the end. But if you haven't seen this video yet, go to the learning kit after this session and look through it. It's a funny sort of outlook on the same principle in action as the one I'm talking about here. And finally, the last 90% of your users generally will only be viewing your stuff. They will only be sort of participating from a distance. They don't comment. They might press the like button, but not much more than that. And that's going to be 90% of your audience. And that's important to understand so that you set the right expectations for yourself or your clients when you are trying to create engaging content. And another way of looking at this is using a table like this one. This one I borrowed from another Hyper Islander or Hyper Island collaborator named Jesper Åström. He's a digital tactician, completely focused on the tactics side of how to create campaigns and great digital experiences. And I would recommend that you actually, if you're interested in the 1990 model, we can continue that discussion in Slack, and you can sort of think about who are your co-creators, who are your curators, and who are your consumers? Because that's generally something that you will see again and again, that it's only 1% that actually controls what, you know, they are the only ones that it might be. I'll give you an example. They are the ones that might be sending you an email that's more than a page long or half a page long telling you how you can improve. That's a clear one. That's a person that's putting in input to only for you to better yourself and better the experience for everyone. The kind of co-workers without actually being hired by you. The curators, on the other hand, those are the people that often comment. They will comment on content from you or from your ones, and you need to think about, okay, what's the desired reaction that I want from the curators that actually sets the tone for the remaining people. So we can talk more about this later. It's going to come up later again in the course. But for now, I want to actually open up the floor because I've seen my chat box blink at least 20 times. So Thomas, any questions already in there that we need to clarify, or what's happening?
Yes, yeah, it's been blinking, but it's not so many questions actually. But I think the last question here from Jenny, are you still here? Make yourself heard. Do you find the unmute button, and why don't you bring it up here? And then we go back to Haley after that.
Yes, I'm here.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes.
Can you hear me, or?
We hear you.
You can hear me.
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
No, my question was, so do you make a smart goal with every marketing activity in your marketing plan?
No, that's usually not how. Is that the full question, or is there like other parts to it that I should be aware of?
Well, or do you make a smart goal to your strategy as a whole, rather, or both?
Well, so actually I usually set up both strategic and tactical goals. I might use different frameworks for them, where the tacticals usually end up being more SMART goals and follow that principle or that framework, where strategic are more closely related to business objectives in general. And this is something I often put together with a client. We put together a strategic objective, and then I don't usually put it in place in the same framework as a SMART goal. But when it comes to how I track my everyday work, then I put together a SMART goal so that I know, okay, am I actually making progress towards this objective that we put together? It's not for every single activity, because that would, I think, put unnecessary labor into my workload in terms of how much I have to do if I have to go back somewhere and always look at how am I looking at towards the goal today or this minute. But it does help to sort of have at least a weekly check-in with it, so that you can update it. And preferably, as we get deeper into this course, you might see that we actually encourage you to automate things. And there's this tool from Google that connects well with Google Analytics and with Facebook called Data Studio. And that can give you sort of it's a good place to build a dashboard from many different sources. So not just from Google themselves, but from other data sources as well. And through having a dashboard, it makes it easy for me to just go in, have a look. Okay, am I progressing with these metrics that I've set up for myself within this week, and then report back to the client with whatever deadline we have set for reporting.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Thank you. Absolutely.
Okay, cool.
Cool. Then we have Haley. You had about the limitations of the different SMART goals, right?
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
Hi. Yeah, my question was, I've not set goals before, and I set up 2 websites, which I've not done anything much with them. And so when it comes to setting goals, I've set a goal of I'd like 5,000 signups in 3 months. And I don't know if that's doable or how I mean, I don't want to kind of set a goal that's too big, so it's not at all doable. And how much I'll be working in this 6-week course to focus on getting these signups. So yeah, any tips around my being too
I mean, I can tell you from experience of having done these courses quite a few times before that people can be quite ambitious when they're putting in place their SMART goals in this week, and that's okay. You know, we don't want to discourage anyone from being ambitious, but of course it helps if you have some kind of data already that you can look at, so that you can make somewhat of a rough, back of the napkin kind of calculation for finding the right level. If you're going to go for 5,000 signups and you have, very little today, that might be very ambitious to reach within 6 weeks or 3 months. But on the other hand, if it would be that you have a big budget to do a large investment, so you could promote to a lot of people that you want them to sign up, then it's entirely possible to do. It's just, does it make sense to put all of that money in there? So some back of the envelope calculation usually helps me in coming up with what kind of level should I be putting the goal at. And when I'm working with clients, if it's not clients that already have a very clear idea about what kind of target they want to put in place, I usually, I like to go a little bit on the careful side and not be too ambitious and give too many promises if they can't promise me to have a very extensive budget to do remarkable things. Does that help? Okay, I got a thumbs up, so I'll take that as a yes.
Sorry, yeah, thank you.
Cool. We have Gustavo. You had something.
Yes, hello. Good morning.
No.
My question, we are in DMOC, so we have a web page and we have an Instagram. So our real clients or our real target in the web page are some potential clients or our clients and people from the industry. So I don't know if we can do some efforts in Instagram to link it with the web page, so more people can go to see all the information in our web page. I don't know if it's a real objective or not, or I don't know how to play with that. If it's possible to do that.
I mean, so the way that now I'm not entirely sure what kind of business is it that you're in, Gustavo. You
advertising.
It's advertising. Okay, yes. So you want to get clients from Instagram to your websites as potential leads, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I mean, that's something that the agency that I work with here in Munich, they managed to gather a little bit of a following on Instagram, and they want to see it as a channel for generating leads. Yes. Okay. So it is possible, but mostly, first of all, Instagram has set up some rules around what you need to have accomplished to be able to link from Instagram. Yeah. So from your profile, from your bio, you can put a link already that everybody can do, as long as it's not a URL that has been flagged for spam or for being inappropriate content. I've had that happen, not to the agency, but to some of the brands I've worked with. So you can link from there, and that means that you often need to post stuff like, oh, go to bio to find the link, So Right? You have brands that say like, we've updated our blog, here's an image from our blog post, or something that teases people in so that they actually feel like they want to go to the website and see you. And then they say, go to our bio to get the link. So that's one way. Another way of working with it is that you can, if you have enough followers and you have a verified account, you can start using URLs in your stories. So you can do Instagram stories where you can actually send people off to an experience online. That's another one to do it somewhat organically. The easiest way, unfortunately, as it happens to be with all of Facebook's different products, pay to play is the fastest way to get to it. So if you go into Facebook's Business Manager, regardless if you have a Facebook page or not, you can set one up and connect it to your Instagram account and skip out on actually updating the Facebook page, but just use Facebook's tools to advertise on Instagram. And then you can start putting in links on individual posts. You can start putting in a call to action that links to a specific page on your website, and you can do a little bit more. So that's actually how the agency I work with do. We take some of our best performing content, or when we have something we want to promote on the website or somewhere else where we want to show off, we on our account, we buy some ads and we target the people that follow us and others of similar interests to reach more people. And then we link directly to whatever it is that we wanted to get to. And then we keep track of how many people click through, if there's campaign tracking. If we can do campaign tracking, we put that in place so we know, okay, in Google Analytics, we can see this many people came from Instagram and so on.
Okay.
So there are things to do it. Some of them are organic, but asks more out of people. So you usually have a less conversion rate than if you decide to give Facebook your money and put out some Instagram ads.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Jana, you have a question here as well. Please correct me if I get that pronunciation right or even close.
No, it was exactly right, actually, Jana. So good job. So I think I'll walk through the learning kit, and I think that I saw the answer there, but the question was regarding the user journey. Does it need to be based on Google Analytics, or is that only in the extension task? And if I want to map a user journey and not do the extension task, can I have it on top of my head, what I know about my business and the user journey?
Yeah, you could absolutely do it on top of your head if you know your user journey really well and you have like a Google Analytics slide that can help you support that. However, what I will say is like the most basic way before getting into the extension task where we ask you to also use Google Analytics, just for the basic task, it's enough to actually look at non-data supported things. So you could just go to an incognito window or some kind of private window, do some Google searches, and look what kind of user journey that takes you through, either for your own brand or for a brand you want to aspire to be like. Grab screenshots of that. And what I would say, if you go into your own Google Analytics and use screenshots from there, and then, even though if you know your user journey, it will be helpful for someone else looking at your journal to actually see it supported with screenshots still. So something that illustrates like what kind of stages it is that you're taking users through will be really, really helpful for others to give feedback on. So I would still kind of do that, but you can do the extension task and the user journey task completely separate, and you can do, cover different journeys. So that's a little bit up to you to decide how you do it.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Yes, thank you.
Okay, perfect.
And Karem, if you have so different here, do you want some tips for strategic and tactical? Is that correct? Is Karem still here?
Yep. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi.
Yeah, my camera is not working, but I can see all of you. So yes, because I work for Tourism New Zealand, and in my business, I won't have access to do any like tactical campaigns. I could only look to the Google Analytics, but I won't be able to do any tests or anything. I could see my consumer journey, but just for my like analyzing. So I would like more to set up my SMART goals as like strategic and not tactical, because that's my role here. I'm the country manager for the Brazil and Argentina. So my role here is to integrate activities between PR, trade, and marketing. So everything we do, I have to make sure that we have the return of investment in those 3 areas.
Yeah.
So that's my, so I would like if you could give us any tips on how to set up the SMART goal that's more strategic and not so much tactical.
Well, I mean, you mentioned that you were working with PR. So, you know, a classic sort of business target that you usually have in that type of marketing is media mentions. And media mentions can be a SMART goal as good as, you know, number of click-throughs from digital ads. So, you know, I think that if you look within your organization and maybe bounce some ideas around with your colleagues, you should be able to come up with some specific things that you could be measuring. And if you're sort of having trouble knowing, okay, but how do I actually do that? Like, how do I measure media mentions? I can point you towards tools and platforms where you can buy that as a service, and you can, you know, you can actually get that tracking going. If it's, you know, it's nothing that you already do, which you might be doing, but that I don't know. But, you know, I would start with asking within the organization, how do we actually know that we get a result of the activities that we do, and bounce around, you know, some of the concepts that we talk about in this learning kit to see, is there anything we could be doing better or define further without it having to become, you know, as super detailed as our examples that we've shown you so far in the learning kit and that I showed you now. But, you know, you can still set up, you know, a relative goal. If it's not an absolute goal, you can set up, you know, more of a criteria that you want to, you just want more media mentions if we're talking about PR still. Does that help?
Yes, it does, because I think for us, it's to analyze when you say the consumer journey. Let's say for us, we have the funnel would be for us in tourism is dreaming, planning, and booking. And what you have been saying, it's sometimes people are booking before they do the planning or the dreaming. So it's sort of trying to understand how is the consumer journey and how we could best target our audience. Could this be something that this could be one of my goals? Is just trying to understand better the consumer journey in this funnel.
Absolutely, and you bring up a good point, and that is that what we show as our model towards growth is, you know, it's a simplified model. It's a model that makes sense from both a course structure and from a very sort of straightforward product first kind of perspective, where it's a brand that has a product and they know, you know, the journey towards selling it, and that it's first you need to make people aware, and then, you know, it's not for something like a service or something that might have a longer lead or a slightly less direct sort of journey. And that's why we actually show more models on how you could structure these kind of things in the learning kit. So if I were you, I would maybe take a look at inbound marketing, for example, which is one of those models where it's not as straightforward as we put it in the sort of structure of this course, because it just helps. And the reason why we have that, as I said, is because it's a straightforward journey. But in real life, we know that there are many clients that actually don't have that straightforward user journeys, and inbound marketing is a way to sort of familiarize yourself with a different way of illustrating it and describing it. But the reason why we show so many different ones is also because a lot of the concepts in the end are the same, and we want you to sort of get a good sort of foundational understanding that, okay, someone is calling it attraction, Hyper Island calls it attraction, but someone else might be calling it something different. So just exploring those different models not only helps you get an understanding of what different ways of structuring it exist, but also the fact that digital marketing is a lot of buzzwords, to be frankly.
Cool. We have a few more people coming up. And Kevin, you say you have a couple of questions. Can you filter that down into one or two so we have time for everyone?
Sure. I've got two questions. The first question is with regards to user journey, and the second one is with regards to setting up SMART goals.
Right.
So I think to start off on the first one for the user journey, how, and I've asked some prior questions on the chat groups with regards to having multiple platforms, and that's sort of the reality of the consumer experience.
Yeah.
How do you advise setting up a user journey which either is based on hypothesis or data, given there are multiple platforms? Should we estimate what that looks like across the whole experience from start to end, or should we, for simplicity purposes, develop a user journey which sits within a single platform which we can analyze?
I mean, I know, because I answered on your question on Slack what kind of situation you're in. So I realized, that it is a lot of different user journeys that are out there, and that you will have challenges in terms of how you're going to measure it, because not only because you're working with a lot of third-party vendors, but also because probably within your organization it's not entirely streamlined how you talk about these things. So with that being said, I think that there's benefits to both of the ways that you're suggesting. I think that, creating an idealistic kind of idea about how you want the user journey to look like, that can tell you certain things, and it can help you onboard more of your organization in terms of like, how should we be tracking this, regardless if the actual user journey looks like this in reality or not. But the other way that I would approach it is by, going to consumers and talking to them and trying to, get some input on how it actually looks like out there. There's some frameworks out there that I think are helpful. I don't know how much you're directly working with, because I know you mentioned that you work with partners and with third parties. So I don't know how much you directly speak to consumers, and if that's really the stakeholder that you have, or if it's the third party handlers that you should be talking to. But this frameworks like the one called Jobs to be Done, that I think can be helpful in mapping out the user journey, because it forces you to really boil down what the need is, what the actual job that you want to accomplish is, and then from that I would start structuring out like the what the journey looks like to getting to the job to be finished. So now it's highly theoretical, and I'd love for us to continue this discussion on Slack. But if you had something out, if there's anything else that we can bring up now within 2 minutes, shoot.
Yeah, I think the second one, it's a little bit connected but somewhat separate with regards to setting up a SMART goal. I think a lot of, I think the user journey is a little bit more not simplistic, but maybe easier to assess if it's an internet-based business.
Mm-hmm.
But is there a certain model that you suggest that we can refer to when it comes to, well, the fact is that a lot of the sales happen offline, and hence how do we develop the right kind of SMART goals so that we don't end up just monitoring vanity metrics, for example, just monitoring Facebook for the sake of engagement?
Yeah. I mean, I have some experience with marketing mix modeling and with attribution modeling, and we could point you in some direction there. But as Thomas pointed out, this is kind of the $1 million question. Whoever figures this out in a consistent way that works across many brands and corporate environments, that's going to be a person that goes from being a millionaire to a billionaire really, really quickly. Because that's the question on everybody's mind. But there are models out there. As Thomas pointed out, Google developed one a couple of years ago. Yes, it's digital focused, but it does allow you for including offline data sets. Facebook has a similar one where they are trying to collect more offline data into their analytics software, so that they potentially could also present a competing model. But for the sort of extended purposes of this course, we're not going to go super deep into this, even though we will talk a little bit about marketing mix as we get further into it.
Okay, so I think I understand the context, and I don't want to take up too much time, but so then should we set up a SMART goal which sits on one platform?
I think Thomas, do you have some input there?
No, not really. And I think in general,
you look opinionated.
You can hear me. No, I think the thing here, like when we think about SMART goals is something that is used in order to just break down what I want to achieve and break it down and make it as specific as possible. That's the model or the method of doing this. And then what do we want to do? To be frank, it's like we are not doing this because we want you to do anything and hand it into us for your SMART goals. It should be something that is valuable to you, and then put that on a level to make sure, like, yeah, you want to have too much expectations, so you don't going to reach it. So it should be like somewhat reachable. Does that make sense? But it does make, so in your case then, Kevin, it might be, I need to seriously look into how this could be done and just do my research, if that makes sense. Because during this 6 weeks, I don't think we're going to sort this out, but maybe we're going to sort out a few different things during these 6 weeks, but not the whole thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And
Yeah.
I suppose it's about learning versus trying to tackle something which is too large. So then perhaps for simplistic purposes, then we got to stick to one platform and set up a SMART goal for that and make some assumptions.
Yeah, that makes sense. And to try it out a bit by bit.
Yeah.
So, we are getting we're getting more questions, but we're also running out of time. So please post your questions in Slack, and we're probably going to take us during until tomorrow until we can reach back to you, at least some of them. But please, these are really, really important questions. So we post them there so we can keep going. I'm done. We're done for today, and the church bells are ringing very soon, I think.
Yeah, they'll be ringing within a couple of seconds, I think. And as Thomas said, thank you for today. See everybody on Slack. Get your, if you haven't started working on your challenge yet, please get to it so that we start getting some reflection journals in, and then submit them through our bot Doris. Instructions on that will be posted tomorrow. And then, whenever you start seeing those first ones come in, read them through and comment and role model how you want others to treat your reflection journal. Thanks a lot. I don't know. I don't see Nella here, but
I am here.
You're here. Great.
Hey.
Okay. Yeah. See everybody.
Yeah. Bye.
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 Thank you.
Thanks for today.